Hey everyone, thanks so much for joining us. Hi.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah, hey, I'm Mary, everyone, with If I Made. Emily, who is hosting today, her power went out
Hi.
as soon as she started talking.
Can you hear me? Yeah, hey, I'm Mary, everyone, with
So, I just want to check. It's kind of just me right now on here, so I want to make sure everybody is seeing everything on our back end. Let me just make sure. Sorry. All right. So, can you hear me okay, Lindsay?
I can, yes.
Well, how's it going?
Great. There is a little bit of an echo. I don't know if everyone else can hear an echo.
Oh, it's probably because I don't have my earphones in. Just 1 second.
Okay.
Sorry, everyone.
Oh, you're good. Good old technology. You can't live with it. You can't live without it.
Always good times.
Yeah.
That's why we always have somebody on the back end just in case.
Yeah. It's perfect.
All right. Is that better?
Yes, there we go. That's
Okay.
great.
Okay. Can everybody hear me okay? All right. Emily will hop back on as soon as her power gets back on. So we'll just go ahead and start. Welcome to FI Made Live, everybody. This is our semi-weekly program where we bring experts in to talk to you about everything wedding. And we have Lindsay here with Lean On Me Consulting, who is here to talk about wedding venues and how to make either your wedding venue profitable, to start it, everything covering that. So, Lindsay, I'll kind of let you introduce yourself if you want to tell everybody a little bit about yourself. I'm going to make myself small so you are big.
Yeah, well, first of all, thanks for having me. I'm so excited to be here and to talk to everyone. So I'm Lindsay Lucas. I actually got started in the wedding industry about 8 years ago as a wedding planner. I loved it. I quickly was able to build a team underneath me, and we are actually located in the Houston area. And probably about 3 or 4 years ago, there was a huge boom in our market where wedding venues, it seemed like they were popping up every single day. And because of our planning company's reputation, other vendors were recommending us when the new venues would meet with them and have questions for them. And so they would recommend that they speak with me and let them know that I was happy to answer any questions that they had. And so that's kind of how it got started. I would go on site visits and answer all of these questions. What have I seen other venues do? How did they avoid this situation? What's something that they could do better for this or that? And I loved helping them. And so I kind of became a trusted friend, and they slowly started calling me at night and on the weekends when they would have these random circumstances pop up. And I quickly realized that I needed to make a business for this. And so I started doing some research and was shocked at the lack of education that there is out there, which still to this day really kind of blows my mind, because in our industry, as a lot of you probably know, starting a wedding venue is the biggest investment that you can make. And so going at it by trial and error is probably the worst thing that you can do, especially when you have investors breathing down your neck. So I hired a business coach and said, I want to do this thing. Nobody else is doing it. Creating a wheel here and going in blind.
All right, I think Lindsay dropped off now. Sorry for these technical difficulties, everybody.
Is that better?
Hey,
hi.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hey, that was weird. Just dropped off. Yeah, you were talking about how this is one of the biggest investments that somebody can make, and you don't want to just jump into it kind of blindly. So.
Right. Yeah. So I hired a business coach and told her that I wanted to do this thing, but nobody else was doing it. So we were inventing the wheel, so to speak, and we just started putting pen to paper and developing a legit curriculum that was 6 months long. And before I ever even launched, I had my first client, and then word kind of started to spread, and here I am, and it's a lot of fun.
Well, that's so exciting. I mean, this is such an interesting, field for some people, because you never really think about, if you're in the wedding industry, like the venues and the venue owners and the runners, and how much goes into the back end. I used to be a florist, so as wedding professionals, you kind of just show up on the day of and everything's perfect. So it's awesome that you've, taken this on and are willing to help people figure out where to start. So let me take a look at the outline. So how do you think, what's the best place for somebody to get started if they are looking to get started in having their own venue? I know we sent out an email to everybody who signed up to figure out how many people were just starting out, had an established venue. So what's the best way to get started if it is something that you're looking to do?
Yeah, start doing your research now. I think the biggest mistake that I see aspiring venue owners make is, they have a decent nest egg established and they know that they want to do this, and they're probably already in the wedding industry, a photographer or a planner. I have had a couple of DJs too, and they, because they have that knowledge and that experience with brides and they're comfortable selling and things like that, they just kind of jump in without doing any more research, and they think, well, I have a successful business already. It can't be that much different. And, I'm already ahead of the curve, so to speak. It's an entirely different ballgame. You are probably, if you're new construction or even if you're renovating, you're probably going to be seeking funding anywhere from $750,000. Some of my clients go clear up to $5 million. And you can't just walk into a bank and say, hey, I've got a nest egg here. I want to go ahead and invest in, I'd like $5 million, please. So I'm pretty sure everybody here is smart enough to know you can't do that. So what I recommend doing is start doing your research now. If you know where you want your wedding venue to be, start looking at land and the cost of land. Start doing market research. I actually run market research reports for all of my one-on-one clients, and I run them on a national, a regional, and a local level, and then compile it into one big report for them. And from there, we start pulling those big stats out of that main report, especially the national one, and we start plugging that into their business plan, because the hardest part of getting funding is educating investors on the wedding industry. They're probably very familiar with, corporate construction, commercial construction, but not necessarily familiar with the wedding industry in particular. And so letting them know, like, hey, it's not just all rainbows and unicorns over here. This is actually a profitable business. It's a good investment for you. I know what I'm doing. By inputting some of those stats, it helps bulk up their business plan. So whenever you're going to request funding, whether it's with a bank or a private investor, you need to show up with that marketing report. You need to show up with your detailed business plan. and a pro forma, which if you don't know what a pro forma is, it's just a fancy term for a really detailed document that breaks down your venues, numbers and your projections. And it's the primary document that any financial institution or investor is going to be looking at, because this is where they're going to start seeing their ROI come in. And that's the main thing that's going to perk their ears up and get them to pay attention to you. And then, of course, the nest egg that you want to come prepared with. I've seen where some venues show up with 6 months of personal and business expenses within their nest egg. I personally recommend showing up with 20 to 25% of your overall loan that you're requesting. Show up with 20 to 25% of that for you to contribute.
Do you think at this stage, I'm sure a lot of people, because this is something that is kind of monumentous to take on, this is a good stage to consider bringing on partners. Do you ever work with people who do this? Like there's multiple people involved in kind of starting a venue, because it is, in addition to a financial and, like a commitment, it's also a time commitment, because as an owner, especially at the beginning, probably before you have like a big staff, you're having to spend a lot of time, yourself on the weekends. So is that something that people do a lot, is have partners when they start out?
Yeah, there's a lot of venue owners that are a collective partnership, whether it is families or, like I've had a client that it was 2 sisters and their husbands that partnered. I have a couple of stories there. I have another client that it was a whole family. So like a daughter, her husband, and then the daughter's parents that have invested, and they're all in on it. So yeah, there's usually more than one partner, more than one person taking this on, because you're right, it's a huge burden financially as well as time consuming, especially if you have a family. And now what I want to stress there is always, always, always have a contract in place. More than not, you, whether you're partnering with family or friends, you definitely want a contract in place, but there's also going to be like a board of directors that are third parties. They're unbiased. So that way, when, you're hashing it out at your Christmas dinner party over what chairs to purchase, you can go to somebody that's unbiased and, get a third party's opinion as well.
That's really good advice. I know that's like working with friends is always difficult. So
it's very difficult.
Yeah. Dina actually asked a question, and it kind of brings something up in my mind. When you're starting out and you do want to take that business plan to investors, how much detail, obviously you need projections and the financial part worked out, but how much detail do you think you need to be able to present to those investors in terms of like, we're going to only use certain caterers, or we're going to, have, this season on or this season off, or all of those kind of nitty gritty details? Or is it really just like the business part, and they don't really care about the like bones of the everyday workings and what your clients will be doing and everything like that?
Yeah. So I think as detailed as you can be pertaining to the business overall is a good way to approach it. Now, your business plan is going to be broken down into a ton of different sections where you're talking about your marketing, you're talking about hiring and what you're allocating for salaries versus, purchasing actual hard products to bring in. Now, so I think your business plan, just to answer directly, should be very detailed. There is one aspect that a lot of people will say that you should come with and just show them, and that is going to be your personal and your business taxes for the previous 2 years. I think that you should come prepared with that, but I think that you should keep it in your back pocket until it's requested of you to give it to them. It's kind of like showing up to court. You don't want to just spew out all of this information that nobody necessarily needs, and then it could potentially cause a hiccup later on down the road. So be prepared in case they do ask for that, but don't offer it right away. And then in terms of your business plan, definitely be as specific as you can. And just because you brought up seasons, I wanted to mention, from an investor standpoint, you should never have a down season. So even if you're somewhere up north where it is solid ice 6 months out of the year, you need to get creative and think outside of the box and talk about, oh, we're going to host community events. Like, I know it's not wedding season, but we're hitting up all of these different oil and gas companies to host their Christmas parties. And we're talking to 7 different high schools about hosting their homecoming or prom or whatever. So they want to know that you're not solely relying on this one niche to put money in the bank and food on the table.
Yeah, that is something that I've seen venues when I've worked in them in the past. Like, a lot of times your downtime, even during the week, is Monday through Friday. Mm-hmm. And what are some things that you've seen in the past that people have presented as, we can use this space alternatively during the week? Because that is something that an investor would probably ask at a initial meeting.
Yeah, absolutely. Investors want to see all different revenue streams that you have coming in, not just from weddings. So corporate meetings or corporate events, I would recommend immediately reaching out to any big corporations. Again, I'm in Houston, so oil and gas is everywhere over here. So reaching out to big corporations like that, if you can solidify contracts that are renewing year after year for their holiday Christmas party, it's perfect. That is gold for a venue, because whenever you're working with corporate holiday parties, they have a set budget and they don't really care how it gets used. They just need it to get used so that they don't get taxed on it at the end of the year. So securing those and renewing those year after year, making those great relationships is perfect. Also being involved in your community, being able to host trade shows or, family movie night on the first Thursday of every month, whatever the case may be. There's also date night ideas where you can charge or work with a catering partner to where they can show off like a fancier menu and also be in front of an extra audience that they typically wouldn't be in front of. And then you just charge tickets at the door or pre-sale. That is an extra way to get revenue. I already mentioned prom and homecoming, any school events. If you're close to a university, reach out to them. They probably have programs or retreats or business seminars that you can be reaching out and getting those contracts in place. Sunday suppers, again, it's a little kind of like date night, but a little more relaxed, maybe like a barbecue or a crawfish boil, something like that.
Yeah, well, that's super helpful, I'm sure, to everybody. And we have Emily's back. Thanks for everybody being really patient during that. We've had a lot of webinar technical issues. That one's not one that we've had before. So I'm going to stay on just for a minute and make sure that her connection is stable before I hop off. But let's back up a second. Even before you get to the point where you're talking to investors, how do you even know where to go? So Kimberly asked, where should I start looking to find an investor? You mentioned banks.
Yes. So banks are going to be in your best interest to go to first, simply because they're going to have a fixed interest rate. You're going to have that amortization schedule that's set out for the next 4 or 5 years. You know exactly where you're at every single month, and you know what that repayment looks like. Another is city funding. So there's a lot of times that your city will want to improve a local area or bring more business to a specific area. Maybe they want more heads and beds with their hotels and their travel accommodations. And so they're looking to invest in a local attraction like a wedding venue to help them bring that those extra eyes to their city. So there's looking into that. Private investors, that's usually whenever you have, family or friends that own businesses or a part of businesses that you can go and talk to. There's also, we've all seen Shark Tank. So if you're going to like an actual legit investment company and talking to them, and you have to be very prepared with your presentation and all of those same things that I previously mentioned about going to a bank and asking for funding in that manner as well. My first choice for all of my clients is to recommend that you go to a bank first. Now, with that being said, I want to make sure that everybody has a good mindset before they go in there, because I feel like that is a huge part of it. You can have all of the paperwork that you need and be fully prepared, but if you don't walk in there confident and like you know what you're doing, they are not going to want to lend to you. So you need to be able to convince them that you're the right person for the job. You're the one that needs to be steering this ship. You know what you're doing. You're successful because of X, Y, and Z and what you've done in the past. This is not the time to be humble by any means. You need to toot your own horn here. And I want to make sure that you understand you're going to get told no. Most of the venues that go to financial institutions like banks right off the bat, they hear 7 no's before they get a yes on average. So you need to start growing that thick skin now and start getting comfortable with being turned down. It doesn't mean that you're not a good fit for this or that you shouldn't go after this dream. You absolutely should. But just remember that you got to keep trying, keep getting back on that horse and going after it. And then also you might need to pivot. You know, if you keep getting no after no after no and you're asking them why, and it's not something that's within your control that you can fix, then you might need to pivot and think outside the box a little bit by going to different investors and different corporations and, you know, adjusting your presentation a little bit. I have a client right now. She has been told no 12 times by 12 different banks. We've adjusted her business plan. We've asked them why. We've received feedback, had really great constructive criticism, but she just, for one reason or another, keeps getting told no. So right now we have gone back to the drawing board, and now we are looking at other more well-established venues, and we're going to them and presenting them with this pitch. This is why you should invest in me. You know, I'm very well qualified for this. This is another wedding venue to go ahead and put on your resume. And by having another wedding venue owner investing in her new venue, she's not only getting a lifetime mentor throughout the length of her business's life, but she is also getting that funding that she needs right up front. But by having somebody that's been there and done this with my consulting with my clients, I stop at 6 months and we build an exit plan, but being able to have that built-in mentor is pretty priceless.
Lindsay, do you find that most of your clients have they piecemeal their funding together? They have a bank loan, they have some family money, they're putting in some of their own personal money. Do you find that most people have to pull together multiple funding resources to make a venue happen? Yes. I don't recommend going past 3. So usually that's a bank, you're putting in your own, and then maybe an investor from, a third-party investor. And the reason I say don't go over 3 is because then you're getting multiple different interest rates building on top of each other at the same time, and it takes you much longer to pay that off. And it takes you longer to start seeing your own profit. Mm-hmm. No, that makes sense. You spoke earlier about how you're kind of having to rethink this pitch with your current client to show experience being brought on the vendor team. Do you find that's the case with a lot of the clients you're working with? For instance, I know in workshops or that I've taught at or even attended, I meet a lot of people who are interested in potentially starting a wedding venue, but they don't necessarily have experience running a venue. They may be a photographer that sees a need in their local market. They may be a planner that, also sees a need in their local market. Do you find that you have a higher chance of getting investor funding when you actually have someone on your team that running or building a wedding venue?
Yes. So I actually have a client that they had all of the funds up front. They had a smaller gap that they were going to be requesting. Their nest egg was at 35% rather than the standard 20%. And so they felt very confident. They came from the corporate world. They knew how to put together a really in-depth business plan. Their pro forma was perfect. So they checked all of the boxes, and the banks ultimately told them no, because although they were great business owners, they had 0 experience in starting an event or wedding venue. And so they went out and started doing some research, and they originally just wanted to hire somebody and put someone on salary to be just the venue manager that had experience. But then through a weird turn of events, they found me on a podcast, we worked out great. They brought me on their team. I rewrote their business plan and included myself in there. And they went back to the second bank that they originally went to. And they ended up saying yes. And so afterward, they were asking, like, what made the difference? Like, what did we change? And they said, you brought on a professional that has experience in this. You had somebody in your corner that knows what they're talking about.
What are the common, I guess, pushbacks that you hear from banks, from private investors? You know, what are they I guess your clients are coming to you at different points in the process. Some of them may not even started, putting together a pitch yet. Others may have unsuccessfully been able to pitch to banks. What are the common themes that you're hearing of, you don't have this, we're looking for this, for our audience who are considering or in the middle of putting together their own business plan right now?
Yeah, they'll have different pieces, but not the whole package, so they might have a business plan, but no pro forma, or they might be just a little bit shy within their nest egg. And then, of course, like the scenario that I just gave, it's the lack of experience. So being able to, it serves you well to take the time now, if this is something that you want to do, take the time now, do the research, do the legwork, put together a great package, a great presentation, and make sure that you check all of the boxes.
And you already touched on this, but for brand new beginners who are new to this world, can you kind of explain to us what a nest egg is and what a pro forma is?
Yes. So a pro forma is just simply a standard financial document that breaks down your venue's numbers and projections. It is the primary document that they'll be looking at. More times than not, when you hand over this file, they're going to skip right past your business plan and go straight to the pro forma and start looking at the numbers and seeing how long it's going to take them to start seeing ROI from you, and how big that overall number is, just what that overall chunk of change actually is. And then a nest egg is just, a lot of people say that you should save 6 months of your personal and business expenses. I actually prefer to play it safe and say that you need to have 20 to 25% of the overall loan amount saved in the bank to be able to basically, you're just showing the investor that you've got some skin in the game as well. Did Emily get kicked off again?
Yeah, I think she's frozen. I stayed in the background just in case. So we actually had somebody ask, for these meetings, a lot of companies seem to want to do everything online. So how do you suggest or push to get that face-to-face meeting? Because I know the connection, especially with somebody who's giving you a large sum of money, is really important. And Katie asked that question.
Yeah, so go about their process, fill out the forms online that they need you to. They also want to see that you can take direction and instruction well too. That's part of the test. So fill out whatever's necessary, give them only the information that they're asking for. And then the squeaky wheel is always the one that gets the grease, right? So you need to be knocking on doors until someone will give you FaceTime. Call and ask for someone within their business department, and just explain what you're wanting to do. They will probably send you down the line several times to talk to so-and-so over here in this department or so-and-so over here in this department. So just stay with them, be persistent, and don't accept no until you get a hold of somebody.
Awesome. And we had a question. Let me find it. I have to go back a little bit. It was a really good one, and a couple people wanted you to answer it. So part of that meeting is probably in that business plan is going to have a lot of market research. So Joanne asks, can existing market research be misleading because there are so many new wedding venues? She says, we have a farm, and farm weddings seem to be the latest thing. So everyone is getting into it. Any advice on how to evaluate market saturation and kind of present that to the investor so they're not hesitant to invest with you?
Yes. So I'm going to explain exactly how I run my marketing reports for my one-on-one clients. I first go to theweddingreport.com and I run a report there. You can go through all of the different filters and run 1,000,001 different reports on there. It's really diversified. But what I like to do there is to run a national report. 2018 hasn't come out yet because we're still in 2018. So right now we're still going off of 2017's numbers. But I prefer to use the wedding report as the national one simply because their numbers are the heavy hitters. They're going to be those big stats that you need at the beginning of your business plan to go ahead and grab that investor's attention. And then the second one, for the regional report, I use Splendid Insights. I tailor that to the region that my client is in. So if they're in the Midwest, I'll run Midwest, or South, I'll run that one. Now, what I like with this, as soon as you look at it, you're going to think, this is fluffy information. I don't need, an investor isn't interested in this. But what you're looking for within the regional report is going to pertain to your marketing. So it's going to talk a lot about what brides are looking for in a wedding venue, where they're going to get their information. And what you're going to do is you're going to use that report and pull that information to adapt the section in your business plan that talks about how your marketing dollars are going to be used and how educated you are and why you're using them the way that you are. It's going to show that you're a knowledgeable business owner. And then for the local ones, what I do is I'll go to local venues' websites, and if they have their pricing and their calendar listed online, I'll notate like how booked they are. If they're about 80% booked, then you know that that venue is doing something right, and you should probably pay attention to what they're doing, what business model they have, what they're offering, what their inclusions are, what their price point is, how they're talking to people on social media and interacting with their audience. If they don't have pricing listed online, which a lot of venues do not, then I try my best to keep it as honest as possible. And I'll go to the Knot or Wedding Wire, some sort of paid advertising site. The Wedding Spot is a great one because they actually vet brides for their venue advertisers, and they're exclusive to venues. So you can usually find just about any venue on that paid advertisement site. And I try to take a deep dive into what their pricing structure is through there. If I strike out there, which I usually don't, most venues have their pricing on those sites, then I really don't like doing it this way, but I will send a phishing email through their inquiry, and a lot of venues, they'll get back to you. It takes a little bit longer than what I coach my clients on because we also go through client experience as well. And a lot of venues actually don't have a CRM system set up with an automatic response. So that's another thing that we talk about too. But eventually when I get that information, I put it all in a Google Drive folder, and then I start analyzing the heck out of it, pulling the information that I need. I will actually start drafting a map to see how many venues are within a 30, 40-mile radius of where my client wants to start building. Here in Houston, especially North Houston, there are 26 venues within a 30-mile radius of each other. It's incredibly saturated. I actually had a past venue client ask me, they have land in North Houston, and then they have land out in the hill country. And they asked me, which one should they build on? And I said, absolutely, the hill country. Houston is way oversaturated. And so whenever you get a market that's saturated, I'm really, really interested to see 5 years from now who's left standing.
That kind of touches on somebody's question right here. Monica asked, do you think the market is getting saturated? And I'm sure the answer to that varies depending on where you are.
It does, yeah.
So if you want to talk a little bit about that and a little bit more about how you can kind of determine that, or at least get a sense of it. I know looking at other venues online, but that's a lot of, data to kind of aggregate yourself. So what would you suggest somebody does if they're trying to determine if their area is a little bit too saturated to get started?
Yeah, so once you've ran those marketing reports and you know how many venues are in your market, start looking at their business model, start looking at their actual product, what it looks like, what they're offering, what their price point is, and ask yourself, how are you going to be different and unique? Why is a bride going to choose you over the 20-something other venues that are local? I can tell you, market saturation is definitely a big deterrent. However, it's not a death sentence, I guess is what I'm trying to say. I actually had a client that is in Colorado, and the area of Colorado that they were wanting to build in, it had about 15 venues within a 20-mile radius of where they were wanting to build, which in Colorado, 15 venues, that's quite a lot. However, they had a very different look that they were wanting to do. Everybody in Colorado was building lodges and, very ski-ish. And they wanted to do something completely different, something a little more modern. And because it was so different, and we had taken a look at Splendid Insights marketing report as far as what brides are wanting, how they're consuming their information, and what they're looking for. We were able to justify what they want their product to be is actually a good choice. And so they built it, and they were at their third tier of pricing within 12 months, which is kind of unheard of. I actually tell my clients, I am really happy if you can get to your third tier by 18 months after your opening. So, or I'm sorry, not after your opening, after you start accepting bookings.
When you're going through all this with your clients, this is kind of a question that Adina asked. Do you think that have you seen that the market is kind of still on an upswing? I know in the past few years, it's been like ever since the recession ended, weddings have kind of gone through another boom. Do you see that it's still kind of growing, or is it kind of becoming stagnant? What's your opinion on that?
I think that it's still growing. In 2016, it plateaued a little bit on a national level, but now, ever since 2016, it's slowly been increasing. And then, of course, depending on the area that you're in, I can't speak specifically to each individual market, but on a national level, yes, it is growing.
Awesome. Okay. Is there anything else you want to talk about in terms of that first few steps? So you get the idea for your venue, you do your market research, you gather it, you're like, this is a good idea. You are trying to find investors. Say you found an investor, what's the next step?
Yeah. So your next step is going to be putting your plan in place. If you are looking for land, then you need to know what to look for in property. If you already have your land, then you need to make sure that it can accommodate everything that you need it to accommodate, and start putting a plan in place. Start interviewing your architect, your contractors, your engineers. A lot of times they'll work together. I have had some clients that, because they have a unique vision, we've had to go with an architect that is in a different state, and then we're on our own finding contractors and engineers. Most contractors and engineers are going to be partners and butted up together. They'll recommend each other and work well together. So whoever you get your contract with, I would recommend asking for any recommendations for an engineer. Once you have your architect, immediately start working on your rendering. There's going to be a lot of things happening at the same time, but as soon as you get that rendering and your funding is definitely secured and you have a good plan in place as far as breaking ground, that's when you can start marketing and advertising. It is a slippery slope, so to speak. I always caution my clients, even though you have your rendering and you are advertising that you're doing this thing and you've put it out there to everybody on the internet, do not put your opening date. At this point, there are 1,000,001 things that are out of your control. There's weather, there's contractors, there's subcontractors that may or may not show up depending on how they're feeling that day. So many things are out of your control, and the very worst thing that you can do is book brides or say you're opening at a certain date and then you're pushing it back 6 months to a year, and you're having to reschedule those brides. Your reputation is everything whenever you're a new business, so you want to make sure that you're protecting it as much as possible.
What if you are coming in, let's say you're not building a venue. Maybe you have seen an existing venue that's for sale, or you're renting a venue. Can you talk about those two scenarios and what the step should be if that's kind of where you're starting?
Yeah, so basically if you're going to be renovating an existing site, is that what they're saying?
Yeah, Cami asked, what about buying an existing venue? So either renovating it, or maybe it's good to go and you just want to come in and you're buying it and start running it yourself.
Yeah, so obviously whenever you're buying it, you're going to go through an inspection period to make sure that everything's up to par. So once you get that inspection report and everything's good to go and you've signed on that dotted line and it's yours, you need to get somebody to start helping you market it. Hire somebody on social media if that's not a strength for you. Make sure that you have everything that you need to run the venue. So everything from your systems and softwares on the back end, clear to tables and chairs. If there are any renovations that you need to do, you should probably get those started before you let people know that you're going to be reopening under new management. Basically just making sure that you're getting all of your ducks in a row for that. And before you start accepting and booking brides, I would definitely make sure that your CRM system is set up, because as soon as you start announcing that you're reopening, it's under new management, and you start getting those inquiries come in, you need a good way to start initiating an elevated client experience so that you can price yourself accordingly.
And what about, is that even common for somebody to want to rent a space and run a venue out of it? Because I know not everybody has the capital to kind of put down, or maybe they can't find funding and they're trying to save something. Somebody actually emailed in about this question, Madeline. So does that happen? Is that something that people do often? Kind of how does that work? I know that there's probably a lot of legal limitations when you're not the owner of the building.
Right. Yeah. But that's typically kind of hashed out between you and the person that you're leasing it from. Now, what I have seen is I've had some people, I haven't had a client do this, but I have heard from other people that have called to get a consult with me. And what they have done is they know that they want to do a wedding venue. And of course, they have these really big dreams of this big, beautiful space that they want to custom build. And they've gone through the process of trying to get funding multiple different ways, and they keep getting that no. And it's primarily because they don't have the experience, and that, you know, nobody wants to lend that large of a sum of money to them when they don't have the experience. So what they have done, which I'm really proud of how unique and out of the box that they have thought of, they actually leased space that was in their downtown city area, and they started hosting smaller events. So they didn't need quite as much funding to do the renovations or to flip the space. It was probably in really good condition. And they started hosting bridal showers, baby showers, birthday parties, family reunions. And then they were able to, in a few years, go back to that same bank that they have already established a really good working relationship with, because they've been repaying that loan on time. And they're able to say, look, I've gained this experience. You can see that I'm successful. I've given you this much ROI. Let's reopen this conversation about my dream venue, and let's start moving forward.
Okay, so let's say either you're in one of three places. You've got your dream space that you're building and you're working with contractors. You've rented a space or you've taken over a venue. It's at this point when you're starting to get the wheels going that you really need to start thinking about marketing. So what's kind of the strategy for, say, somebody who's starting out with nothing to get their name out there, or like work during this period to balance that, building the venue and marketing at the same time? Because you're going to have to probably be doing both to try to start getting your name out there. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So depending on what you have included in your business plan and requested with your funding, if you included operational funds, which would help with paid advertisement, so those online listings with the Knot and Wedding Wire, Wedding Spot, then those are great to go ahead and start getting your name out there as well. If you weren't approved for that much and you had to cut corners somewhere and you decided that that was the area that was the best fit for you to get rid of, then obviously social media is going to be the best way for you to start getting your name out there. And you need to be sharing as much as you possibly can while still remaining cautious with releasing that opening date until you are really, really confident that it's going to happen at the time frame that it is. So you're literally like sharing everything that you possibly can. As soon as you break ground, you're sharing a picture of the dirt, or you're trying to choose between two different tile selections for the women's restroom and you want your audience to weigh in, or you're picking a chandelier for the ballroom. Always ask your audience for their opinion. You can give virtual tours. So have your husband video you giving a tour of the space so that people that can't necessarily make it in can actually see what it's looking like. You can, even if it's under construction, you can help them envision it. You can also start hosting hard hat tours to where when brides, if there's actually walls up on your venue at this point, they can come sign a waiver of liability first. Obviously, you want to make sure that you're protected always. Even if they step on a nail, they can't come back at you. So anyway, they put on that cute little hard hat that you've bedazzled with your venue's name, and they're walking around. You're showing them where their bridal suite is going to be, where they're actually going to have their hair and makeup done. You're showing the groom that he's going to have this amazing pool table set up and can hang out with his guys. So hard hat tours are usually a really big hit as well. Anything that you can kind of think of outside of the box. Start hosting a vendor meet and greet. New venues in an area are a magnet for vendors to start reaching out. They want to make that connection. as the venue owner, when you're in the middle of construction or renovations, you really don't have the time to be having these little one-off meetings with all of these different vendors within your area. So what I typically suggest doing is have a polite, canned response drafted as soon as somebody emails you, and just say, hey, I really appreciate you reaching out. I would love to get to know you more. We're actually going to be hosting a vendor meet and greet on such and such date. Can I please add you to our list, and we can chat more then? And then you're only spending 3 to 4 hours with multiple different vendors. You're making those connections. Afterward, you can follow up with the ones that really stuck out to you, and you're starting to develop your preferred vendors list too. They're getting to know you, they're getting to like you, and they're helping you to spread the word about your venue as well.
It's at this point that I feel like people might underestimate the value of an email too. So when you're getting people's attention at this point, they're seeing that this is new. They're seeing that that's something that they maybe want. Do you encourage your clients to collect email addresses for brides and vendors to send out when, updates throughout the process, or when everything's ready, you can send out a newsletter to everybody saying, we're open, here are our dates, anything like that? Because I know how valuable email is for us at If I Made, and people kind of underestimate it. But it is the most valuable free resource that you have at your fingertips, and you control everything regarding it. So
yeah, no one can pull the rug out from under you when you have a newsletter, which is great. And I feel like most venues in general, they kind of roll their eyes, or they don't think that a newsletter is worth the time. But I can tell you, especially in the beginning, it is definitely worth your time, because it's the easiest way, in addition to social media, to be sending out those construction updates, especially when you have those booked brides. They're going to be all about wanting to know how everything is progressing, what updates they have that week, or that you have that week for them. So yes, absolutely. If you can get as many on your email list as possible, I think that it's a great idea to start doing that early on. A lot of venues kind of don't want to do it and think that it's a waste of time, because as a venue, you do have a lot of turnover with those clients coming and going. But I mean, so do photographers and planners, and they're still doing it, and they're seeing great benefits from it too. So I'm a big, big fan of paying attention to what other niches within your industry are doing, and finding a way at whatever they're successful at, how to make it work for you. A lot of my workflows within my planning company came from photographers. A lot of our marketing material comes from a local DJ. I loved what he did. So just keep your eyes open. Don't have your blinders on, and, try to think outside the box as much as possible.
Do you think, so obviously at the beginning stages, vendors are one of your biggest allies to, book brides. That's often the wedding planner's job, is to suggest venues within an area. So they're your biggest ally. So we have a couple people asking about bundling services. So a lot of venues will do everything. We'll do your catering, your planning, your florals. Do you suggest that at the beginning, or is it something that maybe somebody could consider avoiding until you make those connections and you start running that venue and getting a feel for it, and then maybe you start doing it yourself?
Yeah. Okay. So this could be like a whole nother thing, a whole nother class. If you want to have in-house services, whether that is your bar, catering, coordination, whatever you want to offer, rental items, I think that it's a great idea. If you want to have an in-house bar, one tip that I have for you is start working on the legalities and licensing now. It's a very, very long, very tedious process. I'm a fan of having in-house. I'm a fan of having additional in-house services, simply because it's one more thing that you can add to your business plan as added streams of revenue for you. But also, what I would recommend doing is outsourcing. I'm a big fan of outsourcing those services, primarily because you don't want to get taxed on that. Whereas if you're outsourcing to a third-party planning company, they're a deduction for you. And that helps you. You're eventually going to get to the point where you want as many deductions as you can possibly scrounge up. So what I recommend doing is start paying attention to the caterers that have all the 5-star reviews. Start paying attention to the planning companies that are at the top of their market and have a large team. You want to make sure that they can handle their current workload in addition to your calendar that you're essentially going to be handing over to them. Now, a lot of venues, whenever they're including in-house services, their main concern is that they're going to pigeonhole themselves and that, other outside planners aren't going to be bringing them business. So what I usually recommend is if you're going to have an in-house planner, you can still allow outside planning companies to come in so that you can have those additional voices out in your local community speaking for you, bringing brides to you, and you're not losing out on any potential business either. In terms of catering, if you have an exclusive caterer and there's a bride that desperately wants to serve Italian, but your caterer does not offer an Italian menu, then I would suggest being flexible, because you don't want a bride to say no to you when she is in love with your venue, but she doesn't love your caterer. So you need to have something in place to where it's a buyout fee or an outside vendor fee, something fairly small, $500 for her to pay and bring in her own caterer, with the exception that they abide by your policies and procedures. They can show their licensing and insurance. They add you onto their COI. And I always recommend doing a venue tour with the caterer to make sure that they're familiar with your operations, how your venue's set up, where they can pull their big box trucks in the back, keep them parked, what they have access to, things like that.
Awesome. Thank you so much for going over that stuff. So, okay. This is the point where I feel like, you've kind of decided what your venue is going to be like. I'm either hiring planners internally or I'm, doing it myself. So we're getting to the point where your venue may be a little bit more established. You might start booking brides. At what point, do you start, or let me back up, sorry. What mistakes are you seeing at this point that people are starting to make? I know we told everybody that we would give them the secret to avoiding the biggest mistakes that you'll have when you're starting a venue. So what are those?
Yeah, so going back to those vendor relationships, I feel like a big mistake that a lot of venues make, primarily venue owners coming from the corporate world, they're very cold and standoffish, and they kind of have that mentality with a vendor, which vendors that are on here today, I'm sure you have experienced something along these lines of you walk into a venue and they're very cold, they're very corporate, they don't really want to make a relationship with you. It's just come and go. And sometimes they're slightly arrogant and think, I've built this big, beautiful castle, you should feel lucky to work here. And so those clients have been some of the most challenging for me, simply because I have to do a lot of educating on bridging the gap between vendors and venues. There's a huge gap between them right now. And I'm actually that's a part of this that I'm really passionate about, is being able to educate venue owners on being warm and welcoming and cultivating great relationships with their vendors, but also not being a clique, still letting new vendors that are new and upcoming come in and welcoming them as well, without hurting your go-to tribe, So that's a big mistake that I see. And we talk a lot about that. We talk a lot about how to talk to brides. If you're a vendor wanting to be a venue owner, that's a huge perk that you have. You already know how to talk to brides. You know how to speak their language. So you're ahead of the curve there. I think the third biggest mistake that I notice a lot of venues make is that they don't share their pricing. And I hope nobody jumps off of this call when I say that, because I know that it's a really big controversial issue with a lot of businesses in the wedding industry, not just venues. But a lot of venues don't want to put their pricing online because they don't want their competition to know what they're priced at, or they don't want to scare off brides. And whether you put your full pricing online, if you don't feel comfortable with that, then I usually recommend just putting a starting price, because you never know, you might have a bride that you actually are within her budget, but your prices aren't listed online, and you have a killer website with these beautiful professional images, and she's looking at it thinking, there's no way I could ever get married here. When if you would have just had your starting price, then she would have said, oh, maybe this is doable. And she would have inquired with you, gotten more information, and you could have had another booking. So there's always that side of the argument too. If you aren't comfortable even doing that, then at least set it up within your inquiry workflow to where it's sending a brochure, or at least sending that starting at price with additional information for them. But not having your pricing anywhere until they can either get you on the phone or find you an email, I think is a big mistake for a lot of reasons. And one of the big ones is eventually you're going to have so many brides and be so busy, you don't want to be trapped behind your computer any more than what you have to. And so by giving them as much information ahead of time and by vetting them as much as you can before they get in front of your face and they are taking up your time, I think that that's, a huge benefit.
Yeah, that wouldn't have been my first inclination as a vendor, because all the time with vendors, the pricing's so different for every, every couple and every bride, because what they want is different. But I feel like with a venue, hopefully you have it set up where it's a lot more package based. So it should be something that you're easily able to share online, because it's not going to vary that much unless they're, customizing what they want. If you do have things like in-house bar and valet and things like that.
Right.
Are there any other big mistakes that you've seen people make at this point that kind of come to mind?
I mean, those are the three biggest ones. I mean, we could get into all the little nitty gritty stuff with, mistakes that are made on tours when you have brides in front of you and, things like that, getting into client experience stuff.
Okay. So I have just like a random question at this point. It's talking about pricing. Do you ever get your clients to send out media kits to vendors that have like their pricing and pictures and things like that? Or just, kind of just like we talked about, networking and doing that sort of thing?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of that vendor meet and greet for a new venue. I think it's efficient and it gets the job done. So having some sort of marketing material put together to greet them, I think it's really nice if you can give them a nice welcome letter. Welcome to our venue. Here's what you need to know. One of the things that I do really suggest once you become established and you have your preferred vendors list is putting together a bride guide. And what that is it houses all of your information from example floor plans to your inclusions to your pricing, all of your tables and chairs, those quantities and sizes, popular measurements that brides are always asking for. So, like maybe the entryway of doors for a garland to go across, or the width of a door for a wreath, things like that. All of those frequently asked questions you're constantly putting in there. Your policies and procedures are huge. Helpful hints, your preferred vendors list should go in there. Anything that a bride is constantly asking for, I recommend putting that together in a template format, updating it probably in November or December every year, and then sending that out to your preferred vendors and saying, hey, here's our updated information. Please review it. I know you do a lot of work here. We love working with you. Just please stay educated on a few of the changes that we've made. Our updated pricing is also in there as well.
Awesome. I just know as a vendor that was the best when somebody was coming to us, because a lot of times you just might not be on the top of someone's mind. So sending that kind of stuff out is really helpful. Okay, so let's get down to the final, most important part, which is how to be a profitable venue, because that's really the whole reason we're trying to do this. Yes, weddings are a dream job. Yes, they're fun and beautiful, but it is a job. And hopefully you're doing this to support your family and your life, or get, hopefully give people jobs. So how can you how soon can you start to maybe expect that profitability if you are a new venue, and what kind of track should you be on to get to that point?
Yeah. It's a little bit of a loaded question. It's hard to answer because there are so many different variables that go into, the definition of a profitable venue and when you start seeing that ROI. I mean, there's everything from what's your overall loan amount? What's the interest rate? What does that amortization schedule look like? What market are you in? What price point? All of these different variables go into that. But I can tell you on average, I'm saying that with air quotes because I don't really think that there's a a normal venue. Everybody's different. But on average, most venues start seeing ROI within year 3, depending on their loan size and where they're at with that. Now, just to get a little bit deeper in that and provide a little bit more value, because I know that's an annoyingly vague answer, what I typically like to do as far as pricing is concerned, which this could be a whole separate class too, I like to set my clients up on a 3-tiered system. And it's all based on percentage. So if their end goal is to get to be renting their space at $10,000 for a Saturday night, then we're going to break that down into thirds. And once they have hit, a third of their booking goal, then they're going to jump up to tier 2, so on and so forth. And then hopefully the end goal is to get to that 3rd tier top pricing for a Saturday night by the time you're 18 months from accepting a booking, not 18 months from your opening date, but from the time that you accept that first booking.
So what are some steps that people can do in the beginning to, maybe keep costs down or run things on their own to increase that profitability and get the ball rolling a little bit faster, maybe?
Yeah. So I think that it's a balancing act between your time and then what you can afford. And so a lot of venues, what they'll start out with is their biggest thing is time, and they feel like this business is running them, but they don't have it in their funds to hire somebody full time. And maybe that was a section within your funding that you didn't get approved for and you had to cut some corners. So maybe that was what you chose. What I usually say is start small. You can hire a VA for much cheaper than you can a full-time venue manager. Go ahead and have that VA start taking over emails with canned responses. They're taking over your CRM system. All of the normal things that a VA does or a virtual assistant does, just in case someone, I forget sometimes that not everybody.
Yeah, I was about to ask you what a VA was.
Yes. But yes, VA, virtual assistant. So that's usually a good step if you can't afford to bring someone on full time. And I can tell you it benefits most venues as soon as they can to bring on a venue manager that is full time, to where they're there giving tours. In between tours, they're returning emails. They're working on those event plans for the weddings that are coming up. They're contacting the vendors that they need insurance, COIs from, and they're handling all those little things in between those face-to-face meetings. And it also allows the venue owner to kind of take a step back and at that point work on higher level things that are going to be pushing the business forward and not just spinning its wheels working in the business. At that point, you're actually working on your business, which is huge.
When you're at this point kind of trying to plan out where the funds are going, Isabel asks, what are the most important things to spend money on at the beginning? I know that you could blow the bank spending money, making your venue the most beautiful thing ever. But if you don't have, say, a parking lot or someone to run it, then those are going to be some issues. So what are the most important things or priorities for people to start with?
All of the unsexy things, unfortunately.
Like insurance?
Yes. Yeah. Insurance, attorney's fees, plumbing, electrical, well and septic system, a public well and septic system, which a lot of people don't realize that could run you anywhere from 50 to 200 grand. It's a large chunk of change. Parking lot is something that gets overlooked a lot. It's kind of an afterthought. Everybody wants to take a look at the big, beautiful reception space and how they can make that as appealing as possible to brides. And they tend to forget, oh yeah, we have a 300 max occupancy. These people need to park somewhere. So not only having a parking lot that is big enough for all of your max occupancy to park in, but it's also large enough for your vendors' big box trucks or those large shuttle buses that are coming. Those buses, they need room to turn around as they're dropping guests off, and then they need to easily be able to get somewhere to park and sit for a few hours until it's time for them to pick those guests and take them back to the hotel at the end of the night. So those are things that get overlooked. A lot of people that purchase property in a rural area, they don't think about parking lot lights at the end of the night. Most 95% of weddings are going to end 10 p.m. and later. And it's already dark at that point. Guests are trying to find their keys after drinking all night and enjoying themselves. And it just creates a little bit of a mess there. Other things are making sure that you're up to code with your fire department. Having a sprinkler system is really expensive, especially if you're staying on point with being on code for being able to pass inspection at the end of all of this. Inspections, permitting, codes, those are all hidden fees that tend to sneak up and jump out and attack you at the most inconvenient time. I had one client that had to drop an extra $100 grand to have an access road built, just to be like from a back road, not even like from a main road, but because of the county that she was located in, they had that requirement. So knowing those little things as much as you can ahead of time, go and talk to your city and your county, get as much information as you can about permits and codes and what you need to do.
One thing that I know that I've seen from experience is noise ordinances. This isn't necessarily like a cost thing, but maybe so much like an afterthought, like you build a venue and then, you know, you get booked and then you get there and within 2 months you have like 50 noise complaints and then you're having to get, you know, silent headphones and all of that crazy stuff. So that's always something I feel like people don't kind of consider at the beginning. And parking lots, that's like the number one thing as a wedding vendor in the past. Parking lots always come back.
Yes.
So something else that, you know, people don't maybe consider in the front end is all of the systems that you're going to need. You're going to need CRM systems like you keep mentioning, maybe a virtual assistant, all of the back end stuff. So what kind of CRM system do you suggest? Are there any that are your favorites? Kara is asking.
Yeah, great question. I love HoneyBook. I personally use it for both of my businesses. With my one-on-one clients, I talk about what they need and what they don't need, what kind of workflows, you know, it looks like for them throughout a bride's planning process, what information they're getting, when they need it, when they're going to be requesting it. And so HoneyBook can take care of a lot of that for them. Having a workflow and the capabilities of automation is huge, especially whenever you're a venue, because eventually you'll be hosting anywhere from 40 to over 100 weddings a year. And at any given time, you're requesting details from brides. And not only are you requesting details, but they're also emailing you before part of your workflow has even activated. And so you need to be able to go in there, deactivate that one section without completely undoing the rest of it. So HoneyBook is my number one. I actually have a code for 50% off, just side note. But another one that I recommend also is Dubsado. So usually my clients fall within one or two of those, and it usually comes down to aesthetics and how user-friendly it is, depending on, you know, like how techie my client is. So Dubsado, it's a little more intimidating than what HoneyBook is. HoneyBook is, in my opinion, it's a little prettier, so to speak, from a user standpoint. And so a lot of my clients tend to go that route. Also, a lot of my one-on-one clients they tend to be older, or this is like their retirement plan. I have a lot of surgeons or attorneys wanting to start a wedding venue, things like that. So yeah, HoneyBook, I highly recommend. Dubsado is great as well, just depending on what your needs are. Another software company that you might want to look into to help you get that event plan in order, because sometimes hounding brides for it is not the best way, and some of them don't respond to email, and getting information from them is difficult. But if you need floor plans, All Seated is my favorite. Another great one is Social Tables. It'll help you to develop your floor plan to scale. And if you're a new venue, when you have your final CAD from your architect and there are no more changes, your architect is literally handing it over to your contractor and their team. At that point, you can send it in PDF form to either one of those software support teams. They'll get it uploaded so that every floor plan that you're making from that point forward is to scale. So there's no surprises whenever when your setup crew is setting up for the next wedding at 2 a.m. in the morning.
Awesome. So there are so many little teeny details that go into running a venue that we don't have nearly enough time to talk about today. So Cami, I think we're going to open it up to more questions right now, unless you have anything else you want to say on profitability, because I know that is a just giant Pandora's box that we can get into that's much more complicated than what we can cover today. So I just want to see if there's anything else you want to say on that, and then maybe we'll open it up to more questions.
Yeah, just the last little tidbit here. In order to stay on track with your profitability and to know where you are, and I have put together a really in-depth profit planner. It can be copied year after year, and it's great whenever you're 3 years in to look back and see, oh, hey, year one, I actually started out at this price. And in January, I had my highest bookings because that was booking season for me. But looking forward, I know that July is going to be really, really slow. So I need to plan for that. I need to plan ahead. I need to start reaching out again to those corporate relationships that I've kind of put on the back burner because weddings took over. It helps you, it breaks down, at the top of it has like your sales goals and your exposure, your marketing. It has all of your goals up top. The second section is your pricing. So most venues are priced a certain amount Monday through Thursday. Friday's a different price. Saturday's your top price. And then Sunday is a little bit of a lower price than Friday at most venues. And so it breaks all of that down for that whole calendar year according to month. And then you can like set goals and say, okay, for Monday through Thursday, I need to book 10 events Monday through Thursday for the month of July in order to make up for a slower wedding season. In wedding season, I need to book 4 Saturdays, 3 Fridays, and 2 Sundays in order to hit my number. And then the third section is all of your expenses. So everything from software to marketing to employees, all of the little nitty gritty, your electricity bills on there too. So all of those things, and taxes are at the very bottom to be taken out from your net profit so that you can track exactly what you're making every single month, and then go ahead and just copy and paste it over to the following year and keep using it. So do you want me to, how do I give the link to people?
Yeah, so I think what would be the easiest, we can put it in the chat right now if you have access to it, or I might follow up and email you and get some of the links that you mentioned, because we did have some of those technical difficulties. So I was having to manage both sides. So want to send them the links to Honeybook and things like that as well. So we'll send it out in an email after this to everybody, even the people who weren't on live, because they might not be able to see the chat. So
perfect.
We'll make sure to include that. So you guys check that out, because that is something that if you're new to the wedding industry or if you've never been in it, cash flow is a huge bummer sometimes, like major bummer. Those summer months come and you are just like, where did all the money go? January seems so awesome. So planning that out is essential. Okay, cool. Well, you have just been a wealth of knowledge, and we have a few more questions that people are asking. So I'm just going to hit on a few of those if that's cool.
Yeah.
Danielle asks, would you suggest a full weekend style venue or a day of venue? I don't really know what the difference is. You might.
Okay, so I suggest a full weekend rental venue. I think that with my clients that do that, they see the most ROI when they have overnight accommodations, even if that is only for the bridal party or the bride and groom, or both. Both is great. Putting cabins on site, or I've seen a really cool bunkhouse that was like a modern bunkhouse. That was pretty cool. So yeah, I think a full weekend rental is great. It is a really, really no-brainer idea if you have overnight accommodations, because again, that's just that added revenue, and go ahead and put that in your business plan, because it's just going to help you with those investors. I can tell you that a lot of venues start out as a one-day rental simply because at that, I know it kind of goes against the grain to say that it's quantity over quality, but when you have investors that you have to report to, you basically just need to fill those dates, and you need to go ahead and get as much ROI as quickly as possible. Once you get more established and you're paying your investors back really well pretty quickly, then you might want to rethink things. You're in control here. You're the business owner. So if you want to shift gears and have a slower lifestyle for you, a little bit more work-life balance, at that point, if you wanted to shift and say, you know what, we're only accepting 40 weddings this year, it's going to be first come, first serve, and you have the opportunity to rent the full weekend rental at that point, then you can reevaluate your package offering and your pricing. But I usually recommend, unless you're having some sort of attraction for a full weekend rental to where you can jack up that pricing and make up for those 3 days than just being a, single rental facility per day.
Awesome. Oh yeah, that totally makes sense. I forgot that there are venues out there. There's not that many venues in Atlanta where I'm from that are weekend venues. Almost all of them are day up because it's in the city. So I know people, in Texas and Colorado, that's a lot more common. So we have a question that I don't know how far you can get into it because it's super detailed, is what type of insurance is needed to own a venue? And this is from Cami.
Oh, yeah, that is a great question. And I am probably not the best person to ask for that, actually. And it is going to depend on your state. They're going to have a ton of different rates and requirements for you. I would do the max. I don't know what that would look like for you, but just from what I have seen from a planner's standpoint and working hundreds of weddings that way, and then in addition to now being on the other side with venues and seeing things that my clients have called me in the middle of the night about, protect yourself as much as you possibly can.
Yeah, it's usually not that much more to add a lot more protection.
No.
All right, so we have another question kind of about the market. So Kiana says, how do you suggest surveying brides and past brides for trends that they want to see in your venue? People don't know what they want until they see it, but we're all trying to be new and unique. So how can you stand out or figure out what people want?
Yeah, so any venues that are in your area, read their reviews, see what complaints there were, see what praises there were, what people liked and what they didn't like. Also, even more important than that, look outside of your local market, even your state, and start looking at those really popular, like nationally known venues like Pippin Hill. Take a look at what their brides loved and what they didn't necessarily like, and maybe what you can incorporate or tweak a little bit for your venue. If you are at a point where you have past brides, send out a survey and just ask them, what did you like? What did you not like? Get your review first and foremost. Get that 5-star review first. And then later, maybe send out a quarterly survey to brides that were married in the previous quarter and just say, hey, we just have a really quick survey to 5 questions. Send that out. Keep all of the documentation. With most online surveys, you can export it as a CSV file, keep all of that on file so that you can go back quarter after quarter, compare all of the notes. Answers are going to start rising to the top, and you're going to start seeing people are saying the same thing over and over. More than likely, it is probably going to be, oh, it would have been great if we would have had a chapel to use because it rained and we had to flip the reception space. Or it would have been really awesome if my groom could have gotten ready on site as well. If you had a groom suite, that would be totally great too. Little things like that, or big things like a chapel. So yeah, start sending out those surveys, read reviews. Also take a look at Splendid Insights, run a report there. I think it's $125 to run a report. Take a look at, again, it's going to look like fluffy stats to you, but it speaks more to the marketing side of things, where brides are going to consume their content, what they're looking for within their content, things like that.
That's something that people, I feel like, neglect in the wedding industry is reviews. So it's kind of common knowledge, and I think it is it's 10, I don't know, 10 times, somebody's 10 times more likely to go on and give a bad review than a good review. But there are probably 10 times as many people, hopefully, who loved their experience. They just aren't thinking twice about it and they're moving on with their lives. So Monica asks, where do you suggest cultivating these reviews? Should you send them out to, your top clients, to every client, to people who just reach out to you? How do you suggest going about that and getting those Google ratings and the Yelp reviews up?
Yep. So I'm a huge fan of Google, first and foremost. I use it in everything in my business. So it's no secret that I'm a Google snob. It is also the quickest way for you to boost your SEO. So whenever you start getting on these paid advertisement platforms like The Knot and Wedding Wire, one of the incentives that they're going to give you is that you get 10, 20% off of your annual membership if you generate 10 reviews for the year. If you want to work hard for that, great. I can tell you what's going to serve you more in the long run is, instead of asking your clients to give a Knot review or a Wedding Wire review, go ahead and post the link for your Google review within a canned response. You should also be setting up a workflow for this for every single bride. Every single bride, if you are having an exceptional client experience, they should want to leave you a 5-star review without even having to ask. And by having that workflow already established, it is going to be sending. First of all, you should schedule it to send 7 days after that client's event, because most brides go on a honeymoon for at least a week and they're not going to be looking at it until they get back. If you send it 7 days, they're going to be coming back that very next Monday, and your review request is going to be at the top of their inbox. So those bad reviews that you're scared of should be the exception to the rule. So if you already have that workflow set up for every single bride, maybe a handful of times a year, you're going in there and deactivating that before it gets sent to that bride, because you know she was just a freak bride and you're not going to get a good review. So having that set up so that you don't have to think about it and it's automatically sending is huge. And then you're just automatically getting great SEO. You don't have to work for it or pay Google ads.
Yeah. And for people who might not be familiar with workflows, that's like an email system where they go through automatic, triggers, or they're set up on a timer. Is that something that HoneyBook does? We use, things like MailChimp will do that, but if HoneyBook does it too, it makes your life so much easier and you don't have to think about it. Google reviews, because one bad review when you only have like 10, it will kill you. So you have to get those good reviews up. Speaking of reviews, and one more advertising question, do you suggest people pay for advertising? Blogs are kind of honestly on the downturn. Magazines, Martha's only going to once a year now, I guess, maybe. So how do you suggest people kind of navigate that, or should they redirect that marketing budget to, say, Facebook or Instagram?
Yep. So I think for a new venue, yes, you need to be allocating some of your marketing budgets to paid advertisement platforms like The Knot and Wedding Spot are my 2 favorite ones. Now, I will tell you, I'm from the South, so The Knot is huge down here. Wedding Wire kind of takes a back seat. However, I have seen with my northern clients that Wedding Wire rules the roost up there. So just evaluate your location, your representative to whichever platform that you decide is a good fit for you. They're going to make all the difference in the world. So make sure that you have a good rep. In the beginning, as a new venue, yes, you need to be on these paid advertisement sites. Brides are conditioned to go to these sites first. They might eventually, hopefully you have built a following on social media that brides are following you before they're ever even engaged. And they already know that as soon as that ring is on their finger, or even beforehand with some of them, they're going to be reaching out to you. You're definitely on their bucket list. But until you get to that point, yes, I think that you should be allocating and planning on your budget going to those paid platforms. I would also go ahead and allocate some of that budget to Facebook ads. There's a lot of great online tutorials and classes that you can take if you're not familiar with how to optimize those to get in front of a wider audience, especially if you're going to be a destination venue and not just relying on your local community. But yes, I think Facebook and social media is great as well. But as a new venue, you do need to be on those platforms. And the good news is that you can go ahead and request that within your funding. You're building that into your business plan and your pro forma with the money that you're asking for. Yeah,
it is something that I suggest people kind of consider beforehand. Like, social media is not what it used to be. You pretty much have to pay for all exposure. So it is going to be an investment in the beginning. And then you eventually probably would be able to taper it off because you'll have that word of mouth. But that's really good advice.
Right. And one of the things that I forgot to mention with that question, you had brought up, Martha and other blogs and kind of how they're on the downhill right now. As a new venue, you're going to want beautiful imagery, and more than likely a lot of vendors are going to want to build a good relationship with you. And so they'll offer to do a styled shoot at your property. I would absolutely graciously accept that, host that styled shoot, help promote the photos as much as you can, use them as you can. However, blogs, that's not what brides want. I've ran marketing reports for every single region across the nation, and the one common denominator across all of them is that brides want real weddings. So it's nice to have that stock imagery. It's nice that vendors are, they're posting it, they're tagging you and mentioning you, and it's more exposure for you in terms of those outlets. But however, it is not what brides are looking for. So as soon as you can start hosting weddings and showing those weddings, the better.
Yeah, real reviews and real testimonials do like 1,000 times more than anything that you're either paying for or setting up yourself. And Allison makes a really good point. She said, reviews don't just come from brides. We are starting out and have some reviews from people who came to someone else's wedding. Great Aunt Sally went on the Wedding Wire and reviewed your venue, that she had a great time, hopefully.
Yes.
And I think that's a really good point, and a really good, you should try to make an impression with the people who are at the wedding, not just the couple. That's something that I always noticed with venues when I was working, is when the venues reached out to everybody who was at the wedding and made sure every experience was great for everyone there, it really made a difference, as opposed to just catering to the bride and groom, like they were the only people, the bride and groom and dad and mom of the bride normally.
Right.
So that's a really good point. We are about to hit our time limit. So if anybody else has any other questions, this is the time to get them in. We have one question for you, Lindsay, that's more about your business as opposed to venues. This is from Michelle. She said, I'm on your newsletter list, and I know you've mentioned something about a course. Is that going to be happening soon?
Yes. Hi, Michelle. Yes, I am in the process. I'm in the final leg, actually, of putting together a course for wedding venues. I've been doing one-on-one coaching with wedding venues for quite some time, but it's just me here. I don't have a team behind me, and I only had the capacity to take on 4 clients a year to work with them one-on-one, because it is a 6-month program. It's very hands-on, and I wasn't able to serve as many venues as what I wanted to and help as many people as I wanted to. So again, I hired a business coach, and she has helped me take my 6-month program and turn it into an online course. Right now, there are 15 video modules, a ton of worksheets and comparison guides and spreadsheets and PDFs. I think I have 42 template emails of canned responses so far. It grows daily, actually. So I'm hoping that will be launching either the 2nd or 3rd week in September.
Awesome. I'm super excited for you. Yeah. That's amazing. I know how much hard work, obviously, writing a course is. So that's incredible.
Thanks.
We have one more question. This is the last one I think we're going to take. And then I think you mentioned maybe a discount code for HoneyBook or something like that. So let's get this question in, and then we'll take care of that. So Kiana asked, how do you suggest treading lightly on emulating and feeling inspired by other venues without being a copycat?
Ooh, great question. Be honest and transparent. I had a client that she had the funds to a solid year before she actually started taking steps moving forward in her venue. She toured her favorite venues across the nation, and before she toured them, she called them and said, hey, I'm wanting to build a venue. I'm an aspiring venue owner. I love your venue. Would you be open to allowing me to come in and do a tour? And because she was reaching out to these venues and they weren't even in her state, they actually said yes. And because you're honest, a lot of people will try to tour venues within like their local community, and they'll tell stories and say, I'm planning a 50th wedding anniversary party for my parents, and it eventually comes out. Even if it doesn't, you have to sleep well at night. So be honest and transparent. And even if you don't have the funds to travel, still reach out to those venues and say, would you be willing to give me a virtual tour? I can FaceTime you, or we can do a Skype date, whatever is most convenient for them. Definitely go onto their platform and their technology, whatever's most convenient for them, and just ask them for that. Now, in terms of, are we talking like only physical, or are you wanting to know like the guts of the business?
She's probably talking about aesthetically, I'm guessing. Because I think that would probably be the easiest thing to copy.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. So I would just be honest and, call them up and ask them. The worst that they can say is no.
I mean, it's at this point, you just have to be smart. You don't want to copy venues that are and be just like every other venue in your area. But if you go somewhere and you see something that's not in your area that inspires you, I don't think that's bad to be inspired by other people at all. No. I think that's totally fine, especially if you're in an area that's missing something.
Right.
You're not going to create something that's exactly the same because you're not the same person and you're not going to have the same brides. So
right. Well, and you're not going to be dealing with the same city permits and codes too. Like that's going to dictate a lot. I mean, you might want your venue to be this big, but your zoning laws say, oh, I'm sorry, you can't do it that big, or whatever the case may be. So even if you're worried or concerned that you're going to be copying, even if you're trying to only use them as inspiration, you may not even be able to copy them, even if you wanted to.
Yeah. Well, cool. I think that's all the questions that we had listed here. I'm going to turn it over to you if there's anything else you want to say.
I don't think so. Just thank you so much for having me. This was a blast. I loved all of the questions. I love it when an audience is as involved as this one. So this has been great. Thank you for submitting all of your questions, and thank you all for having me. It's been a blast.
Yeah, well, we really appreciate it. And from If I Made, we appreciate you guys dealing with our technical difficulties. There's always a new one with these live platforms, and that's why we kind of warn you that it can be a little iffy sometimes. But thank you for sticking with us, and we hope that, you guys take this knowledge and move forth and start your venues and become super successful. So thanks again, Lindsay, and we'll see you guys again soon.
Bye.
Bye.